Hello, everybody. My name is Nicola Allenkin. I'm one of the co-directors for the California Organizing and Policy Institute. I'm very excited today. We have our other co-director, Mr. Ernie Powell, and also our chair of our board of directors, Mr. Lee White. And we have an exciting program for you today to talk a little bit about the California Organizing Policy Institute, also known as COPI, and to introduce Lee White as our board chair. So I'm going to turn it over to Ernie Powell to welcome and introduce Lee White. Ernie.
Well, thanks, Nick. Thanks, Nick. And it's a pleasure to be here. Many years ago, when I worked at ARP, and I was, and my friend Lee White, who I'm about to introduce, was there too. I got the feeling or the perception that in all the fights, all the political policy fights we were having with people that wanted to cut the daylights out of Medicare, privatize Social Security, et cetera, we were very effective, and we were effective due to our numbers and due to the fact that we were right and they were wrong. But one of the things missing was a strategic sense. And what I mean by strategic sense is how do you define a victory? What are your resources? Who is your real target? And the target means who can give you what you want in that victory or in that fight. So I worked with a good friend named Helen Savage, and we went to the hierarchy of ARP and pressed to get direct action organizing training. And after a year of the syndrome of how come you didn't tell me about this first, and other syndromes which were part of the ARP culture, finally a good friend of ours was put in charge. Money was allocated, and they hired the Midwest Academy from Chicago, who had had years and years of experience in training organizers. And the reason why the Midwest Academy was important to retain for that purpose was that they came right out of the sort of what we call Saul Alinsky School of Organizing, which says that without power, you mean nothing. And power can be, but you can have power because you have money, you have power because you have a good argument, but in this instance, you can and will have power if you have numbers of people behind you, numbers of voters that elected officials and what we call targets will listen to, because if they don't listen to them, they could lose their job or be thrown out of office. Lee White and I were very good friends from the very beginning of my tenure at ARP, and I started there in 1993. I think I beat him in a game of racquetball at a conference we were at, but he never held that against me because I was beating everybody else, including a lot of other good friends. But he was very supportive of this effort to bring direct action organizing to AARP. And to this day, that kind of training that we advocated for continues. So when Nicholas and I met a few years ago and thought that the assets we could bring to the world, if you will, of the world that fights against poverty, that fights for equality, whether it's gender equality, racial equality, et cetera, is a training methodology, and it's called direct action organizing. And so Nick and I did all the things you need to do to qualify as a C3, which is sometimes cumbersome but very necessary. And in the same time, we asked Lee White to be the chairperson of our board, and he graciously accepted. And now we're ready to start really rocking and rolling in the coming months in terms of putting out there the information that can help grassroots citizen organizations to win on the very key issues, and to win at a national, state, or local level. So with that introduction and that background, I'm pleased to introduce the chairperson of our board, Lee White.
Ernie, good afternoon. Nick, good afternoon. It's good to see both of you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
So Lee, can you tell us why this made sense to you and give us a sense of the vision that you see for the Organizing Institute moving forward?
Sure. In a nutshell, I think individuals working in a democracy want to be able to influence society for good. And they want to belong to organizations of influence. They want to belong to an organization that moves their agenda forward, moves a public policy agenda forward in a very positive, progressive way. And in my 40 years of being in the workforce, I found that a lot of times those altruistic goals of wanting to influence what goes on, particularly in the political arena, were thwarted by an inability to know how to organize. They knew what they wanted to influence, but they really didn't know how to set appropriate goals. They didn't know how to take this really big idea and flesh it out and breathe life into it, target individuals that they could influence for better in achieving their goals, and define very clearly what kinds of resources we're going to need to move the needle on these critical societal issues that we're working on. I think this organization that you're spearheading has the potential of redefining how people organize and how they achieve their political and societal goals through public policy and organizing means.
Well said, sir. Well said. A little more context. First of all, anybody who observes this notices three white guys. And I will tell you that we are committed to making sure that our leadership and our trainers are diverse. So we now have a full board, and it consists of Susie Calderon, who's an amazing organizer. She teaches social work at Cal State LA. Peter Braun, who I met many years ago at the Alzheimer's Association, so he has a good sense of how to work with older Americans. Who else are some of the board members? Both of you, please.
So I think absolutely. Just to piggyback, Ernie, the diversity is very critical for our organization, and so we've been careful to think through the selection not only of chair and other members of our board. You mentioned Susie Calderon. You mentioned Peter Braun. We also have Connie Corley, who's also a gerontologist and emeritus professor at Cal State Los Angeles. But I think one of the things that's should be highlighted is also the fact that we are now having students. And so one of the things we've been able to do in the last 6 months is we've been affiliated with an organization, a nonprofit in Los Angeles, El Centro de Ayuda, that's based in East Los Angeles, that has been kind enough to partner and collaborate with us on a space that we can work out of. And as a result of that, we have now two student interns. One is a graduate student from USC, and one is a graduate student from Cal State Los Angeles, who are going to be working with us full-time to help for the next year, to help with advancing a lot of our direct action organizing training that we're going to be doing, as well looking at some of the issues in which we can develop policy advocacy and analysis around. So, but to your point, Ernie, I think the being in Los Angeles, since our agency is centered in LA, and also the fact that we've partnered with El Centro de Ayuda based in East Los Angeles, I think really provides us the great opportunity to ensure that we are meeting not only the needs of the community, but that our organization serves the purpose of being a diverse, multi-ethnic, multicultural, racial, language organization. I think that's very fundamental because, as we know, the issues that are impacting communities of color and Latinx populations, the disabled communities, those that are impoverished and homeless, the older adults and seniors. Those are some of the areas and populations we need to focus on, but it would be um, counterproductive for us to just rely on people that aren't the demographic and that aren't representative of the diverse issues and populations that we want to serve. So absolutely, I want to just highlight that's one of our goals as well too.
Well, Lee, can you give a little insight, since you and I both had a very long history with AARP, around how that organization was able to utilize the knowledge and tactics and strategies of direct action organizing? We had some huge fights, starting when Newt Gingrich tried to do great harm to Medicare, all the way to George Bush, the younger George Bush, trying to privatize Social Security. So can you talk about this training methodology in terms of how it impacted those campaigns and why you feel that moving forward, this is something that people in the advocacy and the social service community should avail themselves of?
Yeah, two major points. First of all, AARP had a long history of doing organizing in very, very good fashion from a national level. They had a really strong lobbying arm. They had a good process for identifying what their public policy agenda looked like, so they knew what issues they wanted to make priorities year to year. What they weren't so good at is applying that skill at the state and local level. And we were just a fledgling organization working at local level, lobbying and organizing back in the mid 90s and early 2000s. We didn't have a long history of having state offices. And I became the director of state operations in 2001 and immediately made it mandatory that all of the states go through some form of direct action organizing so they would know how to organize around critical issues. First of all, also learn how to prioritize so they weren't just taking a scattered gun approach or putting themselves in a reactive pose and setting up a legislative agenda and priority agenda for working on legislative activity that was driven by somebody else, some other organization, or by a very charismatic legislator. Doing training in every state, doing direct action organizing training, made us a powerful entity in identifying who key stakeholders were, in creating more of a collective approach, in working state by state and with our national office on like issues, in identifying where we were going to run into opposition and where the effort might have outstripped our capacity to resource it adequately. I think the goal was to get all 54 state offices of AARP working in good synchronicity at identifying what their priorities would be, and then using direct action organizing principles all the time in doing things like opposition research, in identifying what resources they would need to work on really big ideas and big issues, and in carrying forward a legislative agenda that would build competence and competency. What we discovered is that people were ambitious and very willing to learn, but there were very few states that this came to naturally. I can only imagine what it must feel like right now to be a director of a very powerful, influential private nonprofit or not-for-profit organization with an altruistic agenda, and try to redefine and retool your organization in the times of COVID-19. I think this organization can play an instrumental role in helping organizations retool, recommit their leadership, and do different organizing and public policy agenda setting in a much more dramatic and much more focused way than they've ever done before.
Can I comment on that, Lee? I think you're spot on. I think that's one of the advantages that we have. And we've talked a bit about our organization's capacity to train other organizations in getting their, not only staff, but in getting their constituents connected to a lot of these real social issues. And I agree, especially now, since many nonprofits have had to reduce the way in which their services and the way in which they deliver them, we're seeing that populations are experiencing a lot more. I think one real simple issue or common issue now is housing. And we're seeing a lot of individuals that are being pushed out of housing because they simply don't know what their rights are during these times. So just want to make that
right. And advocates for those housing organizations are really struggling. How do we have the same kind of clout that we had before in doing work with the legislators to make them aware of the problem? And how do we leverage that clout in ways that will make it as impactful as it was before, in a time when social distancing is not just a good recommendation, it's mandated as you do lobbying now. They don't know how to do it.
They don't. Absolutely. Great points. Great points. Ernie, anything you'd like to add to that, or?
Well, then you have to factor in resources and time. And Nick and I have been involved here in Los Angeles County in a brand new organization called the Coalition for Mobile In-Home Testing, because what we figured out, both anecdotally and through just looking at numbers, is that what we figured out was that seniors, because of a disability or because of their income level, were not being tested for COVID-19. And testing is a key element in both saving lives and also stopping the spread of the virus. So we organized this coalition, really just out of nowhere. And we were able to put together, the County Board of Supervisors it has 5 members elected to represent their part of the county. And what we realized, or are beginning to realize, is that I think we're doing very well, because I think we're very close to a victory in one of those districts. But one of the problems we've had is something that, if you learn direct action organizing, the problem is the difference between a problem and an issue. Now, a problem is a generalized condition. Testing. So let me state a problem. Testing in Los Angeles County is hard to get for a senior who is disabled. That's the problem. What direct action organizing does is it makes you, through the patterns that you have to think through, it gets you to turn the problem into an issue. So what that means is that, yes, we know that it's hard to get seniors to the right locations to get them tested. But the issue is that in this part of LA, let's just use Boyle Heights, which is East LA. In Boyle Heights, there's not enough knowledge about what's testing available. There's not enough places. There's not, to go and get tested requires that you get on a bus and a bus violates social distancing. So we made it into an issue. And then we pressed the member of the Board of Supervisors through organizing to provide the resources so that people in that part of Los Angeles would get tested for the coronavirus. So the point is that in organizing, you can't win. We can all be against starvation, okay? But you don't win on starvation. You win because you've gotten a local supermarket to lower their prices because the people in that district, that area near the supermarket, can't afford the prices. And so through boycotts, through organizing, through public exposure, you win in that district. And so one of the problems that we've had in this one instance is that a lot of our people who are great people, and they're very educated, they're very knowledgeable, but they work off of problem, not winnable issues. And so that's what direct action organizing, and that's what the training we will be doing helps people do. Will it crack the nut on a big problem? Yes, it will mean that more people are well cared for. But you win on an issue where there's a person where you know who can give you what you demand, where you know what your resources are, where you know who the people are that will be impacted, et cetera, et cetera. So what direct action organizing does, and what we're going to do when we train people on that, is to understand that distinction. And I don't even know what your question was, but I hope I answered it.
No, well, I was highlighting what Lee was saying, which was, and you said earlier, right now, probably the biggest disconnect is for a lot of organizations is how do they connect to their constituents around a lot of these issues. And where we can fit in very well is we can help not only make those connections, but help train organizations to train their staff to go out and make better connections with their constituents, and also mobilize and also win a lot of these critical issues that we've been talking about. I want to also, because for both of you, both you, Ernie, and Lee, having this experience is a tremendous, tremendous asset to our organization. But I want to ask you, Lee, if you don't mind, I want to ask how you see this organization, if you can highlight, because both of you have had experience in many different organizations. How is our organization, how is it different than some of the other organizations you've worked with, beyond the fact that we do training and in direct action organizing and policy analysis and advocacy? What are some of the other things that you see that are very unique to this organization? Given that you're our board chair, there was some common elements that drew you to helping to serve on our board. So if you can maybe highlight some of those things.
Just 2 points that I'd like to really underscore. First of all, there's no hidden agenda with the people behind this fledgling organization. They are not motivated by becoming incredibly wealthy. They are motivated by really doing good and by providing a training and a framework that will help other organizations achieve their goals and objectives in a much more substantive way than they would otherwise. It's that altruism and playing off of that sense that while we still live in a democracy, we, the people, ought to have some say in how we influence the direction of government at the federal, state, and local level. And I think this organization exists for the sole purpose of really trying to help people actuate that in the most dramatic way they possibly can. That's what I like about the vision and the ultimate goals and mission that have been articulated with this organization.
Excellent, excellent. I think that really speaks volumes, because I know they're working in grassroots movements. If you're not altruistic, then it really is difficult to really focus on those that are underserved and underprivileged, and help lift them up in our communities. And I agree, that's really our goal here. Ernie, do you want to say a little bit more about how we're poised to, particularly within this framework, how we're poised to help organizations and really communities make changes?
Well, organizations want to win on their issues, and we will provide a methodology that takes them in that direction. So let's say that you have a building where the tenants, let's say there's a building with 100 tenants, families, seniors, single people, etc. And you've gotten a 30-day notice that your rent is going to increase by 40%. If that building would call us in to train them on how they respond to this, we would train them on 5 elements. The first is, what is the problem? Which basically means, what do you want to win? And the answer would probably be, we want to stop the landlord from raising the rent so high that people will wind up being homeless. The second thing we would ask them to define for themselves is, what are the resources that you have? The answer would be, well, we've got 100 units. We got one person that works for a newspaper. We got another person that is retired and has a lot of time on their hands. We've got a couple of families who are trying to live hand to mouth, so to speak, and have to get their kids to school in the morning. So what are the resources? Okay. And another question in the resources is, who do you know? Do you know a city council member that can help you to force this landlord not to do what he's doing? The third element would be, who are you up against? Is it just the landlord, or is it the landlord association? And what power do they have? And what resources do they have? Okay, and then the next one would be, who are your allies? There's lots of housing organizations in Los Angeles, assuming this is LA County. There's lots of housing. How do you align yourself with them, get them to come in and help you, and get them to help you in the organizing campaign to stop this rent increase? Okay, and finally, what are the tactics? And a tactic is not an educational dynamic. You need education to get the tactics done well. A tactic is something that your organization and the people that support you does to the target, and the target is the person who can give you what you want. So in a real case scenario, you've got a 30-day notice, okay? And after the 30 days, they've threatened to give you 3-day notices to what's called pay or quit, okay? And at that point, you have to find a lawyer, et cetera, et cetera. So what can you do in the next 25 days to stop this landlord from doing it? What power do you have with the people that you're working with and the coalitions you can solicit and the knowledge that you have about this particular landowner, or excuse me, apartment owner? And I tell you, if you plot all that stuff out, I mean, the first thing that people do instinctually is they say, let's go picket his house. It's the first thing they would want to do instinctually, okay? Or let's go meet with him right now and plead with him not to do this. Those things are not good and bad, and neither good nor bad in and of themselves, but they need to be contextually executed. And the context is going through these sort of 5 elements. Okay, what is the definition of what you want? Who can give you what you want? Who can help you get what you want? And what are the tactics you're going to execute to force him to give you what you want? Him or her being the landlord. So you could, so if, and a lot, what a lot of groups do, okay, and we can't blame them because we're in a recession, we're in a pandemic, is they run to the tactics without getting the full picture of really what they want. I mean, can you afford, if your rent's going to go from $800 a month for a 1-bedroom, assuming there's such a thing left in LA, and it's going to go from $800 bucks to $1,400, what if you could push them into a compromise and just say it was a $100 a month raise? Is that tough on the renter to find that money? Yes, but that would be a compromise that you might negotiate towards. But before you can go to that compromise, you must use your power. Mm-hmm. And to use your power, you need to know the power that you have or the power that you need to attain to create this outcome to save the building and to save the tenants of their of their homes. I mean, when I was working in Santa Monica for the church in Ocean Park, I had a group of tenants come to me with that exact same problem. I had not been trained in direct action organizing yet, but I had enough instincts to know that in order to win this, we had to solicit the local churches, we had to solicit the local politicians, we had to put enormous heat, whether it's economic heat on suppose you found out that the landlord, this would almost be like a gift that you would pray for, that the landlord owned a restaurant down the street from where this apartment complex. You'd start a boycott at the restaurant, and you wouldn't let up on it until he relented. But the way to do this is through the systematic thinking that we're going to train people to do.
And thank you. And beyond that also, Ernie, I think just to touch on, legislative action is also an important piece of this as well too. So
that speaks to as you do this and as you learn and as you pull in, say, the state assembly member or the state senator, okay, then maybe what you could wind up with is a state law that does X, Y, and Z in terms of protecting tenants. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a very good point.
Well, and that's another aspect of our organization that's very unique, because we've combined the policy piece with the direct action organizing. And so I think that's important for us to highlight, is sometimes organizations may get stuck on having one way in which they view the problem or issue. And I think we offer multiple ways of doing that, where we do the direct action organizing, but we can also do a lot of the policy work as well too. So Lee, do you have anything else, since you are chair of our board, any final thoughts or things that you would want someone that's looking to possibly hire us or would like to volunteer or join our organization, anything that you think is important for them to know?
I'd just add this in conclusion. If you're an organization really struggling with how you put your agenda forward in the best possible way you can do it, think about who you want to influence, why you want to influence them, and who might help you get there. I think our organization can help you with that thought process in such an outstanding way that you'd be really, really pleased just sitting down and having a conversation and considering the possibility.
Excellent.
That's it.
Yeah. No, well said. Ernie, anything else? Anything you'd like to add that you think would help highlight somebody that's looking to bring us on board, either on a campaign or project, or that would be interested in volunteering or joining us?
Well, I want to echo what Lee said. I remember the exact moment at ARP when I knew we needed to do something different. Lee was at a Denver meeting. I forget, there was a big word or big title for these regular yearly meetings. I think it was called Denver 5. Does that ring a bell? You still there?
Yes, it does. I had my mute button on.
That's okay.
It does.
And I remember that somebody said, hey, they're going to try to cut Medicare. And it was a table of volunteers, great people, very skilled in politics. and they said, let's go call our congressman right now. Now, that's not a bad thing in and of itself. And we're not trying to stop that kind of energy. But what we needed to do after that happened, and in the course of time, is put together the elements that we've talked about here today. So that we're very, very intentional in the actions that we do. And that meeting that day somehow led to me meeting Helen Savage, and Helen Savage and I spending a year with a lot of people mad at us because why didn't you come to me first syndrome? But we persevered and we pushed, and all of a sudden at another big national meeting, it was announced that we were going to start a training academy, and I forget what it's called, but and it was going to be under it was going to be under this or that administrator, and that we would use and then contract with the Midwest Academy. But the point is that why what we will offer is so important is that it will help people consolidate their resources and learn how to organize to win. It's never just to organize for its own sake. It's in the broad scope of things, yeah, it is organizing for its own sake, but it is organizing to win. And I think that is what I learned that day in Denver and later on. And that is what I learned, what I keep learning every time I read this great big book called Organizing for Social Change. So it's a good asset to people who are out there trying to create social change, and if it's Trump or Biden, believe me, we are not going to be out of business. This will we are going to go through a moment of austerity, meaning we can't afford this, we can't afford that for the next 4 years that we ain't never seen. And it's incumbent upon groups to be able to fight that and to win and to learn how to fight that and win. So though it's a difficult moment, it's a very timely moment.
I agree with all those. I agree with Lee, with your emphasis on that it's vitally important that organizations understand issues and move towards the wins on those issues. And Ernie's point on the upcoming austerities, it's going to be a long haul for the next decade, I would think. And I think even more so, organizations and agencies need to think about how they can expand their portfolios so that an organization like ours, actually we're probably the only organization that can offer this, can come in and help them. So